Hey everyone, Father Lane here. Welcome to another class in our course on the prophetic literature. And today we've moved across the San Francisco Bay to the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum, the home of the A's. And we come across the bay, and it's a significant step down from the home of the Giants where we had our last class. Indeed, you come to a game here in Oakland, get your snacks before the game starts and don't eat or drink too many of them, because if you do need to use the facilities in the middle of the game, these concourses are so narrow, it might well take you 3 innings to get there and back. Of course, this is a word to the wise if this pandemic ever ends and we can actually go to baseball games again. First world problems. I digress. I teach today's class here in Oakland because just as there's a step down between the ballpark in San Francisco and the ballpark in Oakland, so there is a step down in the tone from 2nd Isaiah to 3rd Isaiah. We saw in our last class in Isaiah 40 through 55 that the tone is very optimistic. God is doing great things and people are amazed at how wonderful it is that the Lord is rebuilding his people. Isaiah 56 through 66, the tone is just a little more pessimistic. There are real problems in the rebuilding of this post-exilic people, and Isaiah addresses them squarely. We're going to now look at our outline for Isaiah, and we're now at that very last bit where it talks about how God is going to instruct his people, and indeed not just one nation but all nations. God's going to instruct all people from Mount Zion, and Isaiah is going to delve into those details. So let's get to it. So our agenda for today. First, we're going to look at the post-exilic situation. What can we infer from where this last bit of Isaiah is set? Then we're going to look at a character we introduced in our last class, these servants. Again, always plural in this part of Isaiah. It's never the servant of the Lord, always servants, and it's in a metaphorical, figurative sense. That is, all those who listen and abide by the Lord's instruction. Lastly, we're going to look at what is the most memorable part of this section of Isaiah, the emphasis on the role of the Gentiles, of the nations, and how Jerusalem will allow its light to shine to all nations. So let's look first at what we know about this era. We can infer a lot here from Isaiah chapter 60, verse 10. It says a lot. "Foreigners shall rebuild your walls, their kings shall minister to you. Though in my wrath I struck you, yet in my goodwill I have shown you mercy." You can see on your screen the red and the green designating antithetical parallelism. In my wrath I struck you, yet in my goodwill I have shown you mercy. But notice here that the foreigners are going to come to Jerusalem and they're going to rebuild the walls, and their kings shall minister to Jerusalem. What's notable here is that these walls need to be rebuilt. Notice the difference between what we see here in Isaiah versus what we saw in the book of Nehemiah a few weeks ago. The book of Nehemiah also talks about rebuilding the wall, but its main point is to keep the foreigners out. Remember, Nehemiah along with Ezra are saying, if you're in a mixed marriage, get out of it. Abandon the wife, abandon the children, get out of the mixed marriage. Here in Isaiah, the foreigners have a much more positive role. The foreigners, remember it was the Babylonians who knocked down those walls to begin with, foreigners are now going to rebuild them. So this is a paradigmatic passage, and it gives us a very clear sense that it is in the post-exilic period that this section of prophecy is set. We can also realize that not everything is right. The world seemed just perfect in 2nd Isaiah, but here there are some problems. We go back a chapter to Isaiah 59. That is why judgment is far from us, and justice does not reach us. We look for light, but there is darkness, for brightness, and we walk in gloom. This post-exilic remnant that's come back to the land perceives ongoing injustice. There are ongoing problems. There's still a need for moral conversion. Not everyone in the land has learned the lesson, so it still needs to be taught. So that's where we are. And Isaiah is going to instruct them in this section about proper devotion. And as we've seen already elsewhere in the prophetic literature, and it will continue in other books as well, there's always a connection between duties toward God and duties toward one's neighbor. Justice towards God and social justice. Here's a good example from Isaiah 58, a passage the church has us read often during the season of Lent. "Is this not rather the fast that I choose? Releasing those bound unjustly, untying the thongs of the yoke, setting free the oppressed, breaking off every yoke." Here the Lord is upset with Israel's hypocritical fasting. They're following the letter of the law regarding fasts, but they're not paying any attention to their neighbor. They're acting hypocritically, and here the prophet reproaches them for it. So not all is right in the land. Let's hear what Isaiah wants to do about it. And he focuses principally on this figure of the servants, those who hear and heed the Lord's voice. Let's see what he says. We're in Isaiah 56. The foreigner joined to the Lord should not say, "The Lord will surely exclude me from his people." Again, notice the inclusivism of Isaiah here. There's a marked difference here between what we read in Nehemiah and what we read here. Foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, to become his servants, all who keep the Sabbath without profaning it, and hold fast to my covenant, them I will bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. The key question in this section of Isaiah is, am I a servant, or am I one rebelling against the Lord? It's a binary. One is either a servant or one is a rebel, and you want to be a servant. We talked about this data in our last class, but I'll show it again here. This last section of Isaiah, Isaiah 56 through 66, always uses the noun for servant or slave in the plural. And it's a good number of them here. You can see we've got 7 in Isaiah 65 alone, plus 3 others in other chapters. So 10 uses of this plural, the servants. And this is going to be the key determinant as to what one's future is going to be. Let's see a little bit more about this. We jump ahead to the last chapter. This passage, incidentally, gives Laetare Sunday, the 4th Sunday of Lent, its name. Rejoice, Laetare in Latin, with Jerusalem, and be glad because of her, all you who love her. You will see, and your heart shall exult, and your body shall flourish like the grass. The Lord's power shall be revealed to his servants, but to his enemies, his wrath. In other words, you have 2 choices, green or red, antithetical parallelism. Serve the Lord and see his power, or be an enemy of the Lord, rebel against him, as the chapter will later say, and experience his wrath. It's a stark contrast. So let's delve into this role for all the nations. This is what this section of Isaiah is most famous for. Indeed, in the church, we read these passages, especially around the Feast of Epiphany. We're about to look at the first reading for that feast day, and in the Office of Readings, we read from this whole section around that time. We're in Isaiah chapter 60. Arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord has dawned upon you. Though darkness covers the earth and thick clouds the peoples, upon you the Lord will dawn, and over you his glory will be seen. Nations shall walk by your light, kings by the radiance of your dawning. Notice all of the light imagery and how all of the nations are to bask in the light that comes upon Jerusalem as the Lord instructs his people from his holy mountain. We read on again at the end of the book in chapter 66, I am coming to gather all nations and tongues. They shall come and see my glory. They shall bring all your kin from all the nations as an offering to the Lord. Some of these I will take as priests and Levites, says the Lord. So we're seeing here in Isaiah a much more inclusivistic picture. The Lord is not judging versus one nation against another. God is not saying, Israel are my people, everyone else are not my people. Rather, the decision is, here is the instruction. Take it or leave it. This is going to be a key influence for the New Testament. In our next class, we'll move on to see what some of the other prophets have to say, and we'll move on to Jeremiah. Until then, read well and pray well.